Hey guys, welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. Another chess miniature from the Grand Swiss, which is actually finishing today. So today is the last round and we'll know which players will qualify for the Open and Women's candidates. The game I'm bringing you today was played on round 9 and features with the white pieces Nordibek Yakkuboev from Uzbekistan. He's 2681 rated and a very strong player, one of the players who won the Olympic gold medal for Uzbekistan in Chennai 2023. With the black pieces, another very strong grandmaster, Anton Demchenko. I think he's a former Russian player, but now representing Slovenia, and he's rated 2620. And what we're going to see in this game is a theoretical variation of the Queen's Gambit accepted. Very interesting variation. I think you'll enjoy and learn from it. But more importantly, the most important thing we're learning in this video is the consequences of memorizing opening variations and then trying to remember specific moves and which move order do you need, and the dangers of forgetting this. Something that's happened to all of us, but it illustrates the dangers of learning openings by memorization and not by understanding. Both things have to go together, and the best players in the world have excellent memorization skills, but also very good understanding skills, and we'll see this in the game. So if you want to learn a bit more about the Queen's Gambit accepted and also about these skills, stay with me. Yakkuboev with the white pieces plays the Queen's Gambit, and Demchenko plays the Queen's Gambit accepted. We've seen this line on the channel, I think, several times, and usually white continues with knight to f3, e3, and bishop takes c4. And most of the games commence from this main theoretical position. In this game, however, Yakkuboev prepared the very dangerous e4, which obviously grabs the center and threatens to recover the pawn straight away. But on the other hand, different to knight to f3, which is the other move, it does allow black to play e5 straight away, which is the move that Demchenko chooses. e5 has a decent reputation, but it's critical and dangerous for both players. Especially here, a lot of memorization is required. Of course, pawn takes pawn can't really be the best move because white loses his casting rights. So the best move here is knight to f3, which was played by Yakkuboev. Bishop to b4 check, why not? Knight to c3. And pawn takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Now, temporarily, black is an extra pawn up, but theoretically the pawn on c4 should fall at some point, and this is good for white. Now here, black played knight to d7, which is okay, threatening knight to e5 or knight to b6. I thought about c5 hitting the knight, but then I realized that after knight to b5, queen takes d1, king takes d1, although white has lost his casting rights, the pawn on c4 is damned, condemned, and knight to c7 and knight to d6 are threats. So white is doing very well here. That's why black played knight to d7. However, knight to d7 allows white to go into a line which is tremendously dangerous. But I'm sure both players, as I'm certain that both players had it well prepared, as you'll see, because of the times. We're looking at the times on the left. And while these times don't go down, it means both players are playing fast because they know the theory. So, white captures the pawn on c4, knight f6, and here there are two moves. One is to sacrifice the bishop on f7, very dangerous, risky as well, but very interesting. And the second line is to play f3, overprotect the pawn on e4, and it's just a game. Probably very slightly better for white, but not a big deal. You will have noticed that after f3, for example, black has 3 pawns on the king side against 4, while black has 3 pawns on the queen side against 2, which does mean that pawn structures are unbalanced. That does mean that generally it's easier for a decisive result to happen in the game. Whereas if they're totally symmetrical, then a draw is more likely. So, as we said, knight f6, bishop takes f7 check, winning a pawn and breaking up the king side, and white follows up with queen to b3. Now, when I saw this game, my first instinct was to think that white was just with the idea of recovering the bishop, and that's it. But then I saw that black does have this c5 move with a double check. So I started to wonder, what will happen if black takes here and black plays c5? Now I checked this with the computer, and there's a very long line after queen to a3, pawn takes knight, and knight to b5, which ends up in a perpetual draw. So this is theory. It's probably been played before as well. But of course, it's very risky if you don't know the moves. But in any case, it doesn't matter because Yakkuboev had prepared for this game the move castle. As you can see, both players are still in theory. And even though Yakkuboev castled fast, Demchenko swapped on c3 nearly immediately, which means that he'd already analyzed also the move castle. Not the main one, but he'd analyzed it. Queen takes. And very quickly, 2 to 3 minutes is okay, knight to f8. A good move. He can't castle because he's lost the rights of castling, but he does prepare to bring the knight to e6, maybe at some point bishop to e6. Now, to take stock of this position, black does have an extra piece. We sacrifice the piece on f7, but in exchange for the piece, white has one extra pawn and a big lead in development. I always consider that 3 developed moves for a pawn is good, but to compensate an extra piece, you need more than that. And it doesn't seem to me that the lead in development is enough for the piece. However, the computer suggests that putting a pawn on f4 and centralizing the rooks, there is a sustained initiative for the piece, which basically means that black, as he can't castle, he'll have the king in the center for a long time, and we can launch an attack. It's one of these sacrifices that you either believe in it or you don't believe it. You can't really calculate it till the end because there's no forced win. It's just piece for a pawn and a big attack during several moves. So it's a question of your level of risk acceptance. If you're a player with white who likes to sacrifice and risk and you don't mind losing, this is an excellent line for you because you can win a lot of games with this type of line. The same goes for black. Some players prefer to be equal material and they don't really want to be a piece up but having to face an attack during many moves because they know if they make one mistake they're going to lose. So that's not something that everyone wants to do. In this case, both players agree with this position, and after bishop to g5, which isn't the first move of the computer, here according to the computer the correct move is knight to e6. Knight to e6, and when a rook goes to d1, threatening some discovered moves, then queen to e7 is the correct move, allowing knight to f5, and here the computer suggests knight takes e4, and there is a forced line which ends up with white keeping the piece due to this nice bishop to f6 intermediate move. And I analyzed this position to a draw. So theoretically, I think both Demchenko and Yakkuboev knew that this line ends in a draw with correct play. But as I said in the introduction, you have to remember your analysis. And Demchenko, before the game, probably prepared this line, but he also prepared maybe 10 or 20 other lines. And sometimes in your computer, lines get confusing and you make blunders. You make moves which you should do in one line and you put them in another line. It's always very risky when you prepare before the game. And here, unfortunately, instead of knight to e6, followed by queen to e7, Demchenko very fast played queen to e7 straight away, which is a big blunder. As you can see by the bar, it's a losing blunder. And he played it fast because he thought that this was the correct move because of the other line. And now Yakkuboev spent about 20 minutes and found knight to f5 straight away. And here Demchenko realized he'd made a mistake. He spent 10 minutes, but it's too late. Now the rooks are coming in and the black king is in big trouble. A huge blunder. As you can see, the eval bar offers an advantage of 345 for white. Anyway, Demchenko doesn't resign. He carries on playing, tries to hide his king, but rook to c1 is very precise. It's the only move that puts pressure on c7, but more importantly, doesn't allow the knight to develop on d7 because of queen takes c7. And as long as the knight can't develop, the rook can't develop, and black is lost. Notice that the knight can't come to these squares because of the f5 pawn. So very precise queen to c1, c6, rook to e1, hitting the queen, and now a very precise move, queen to b4. Again, preventing queen to d7 because of queen takes b7. Also, it might be threatening this check. In some variations, the rook is going to go to d1, a very powerful move. King c7 is not possible because of rook to e7, so queen to b4 is the best move. Black played rook to c8, rook to e1, knight to d7, and of course he could have captured the pawn. There's no harm in this pawn being captured, but queen to a5 is even stronger because after b6, rook to c7 is met by bishop to f4, and after b6, it's even stronger to capture on a7 because now b6 is hanging, the queen is pinned. This is a disaster. Rook to e8, check, rook to c7, take. If he takes with the king, the rook on c7 is lost. He took with the queen, and now calmly played bishop f4, and black resigned on move 23, which makes this a miniature. There is no way of avoiding the loss of the rook, and then black has an extra exchange and 2 extra pawns. I thought this was quite a fun game. Goes to show how even a 2600 player can lose if he forgets his analysis. And the lesson we should take from this game is, if you're planning on preparing and playing these high-risked lines where there are piece sacrifices, you really have to be the type of person who can memorize many variations and then remember them correctly during the game. If you are not that type of player, and I suspect that many of us aren't that type of player, then it's probably better to go for slightly more solid variations where you can't really be knocked off the board with a tactic if you forget your analysis. That's my lesson for the day. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a comment below if you want to, subscribe if you're not a subscriber, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Remember, enjoy the game, learn, improve. The process is the most important thing, and see you in the next video. Cheers.